Sometimes you need a little help when pointing out silly things that theists say. And so, here is a good opportunity for you to meet a bard. A bard by the name of Quorac, who very eloquently points out silly things that believers say. So here's a two-parter for more Theists Say Stupid Things. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims, and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying. From claiming atheism is irrational to coming up with gotcha questions that atheists apparently can't answer, theists most certainly do say some stupid things. And sometimes it's fun to bring in a friend to point out the silly things that theists say. Let me introduce QuoracTheBard.
Hello everyone, I'm your favorite bard, QuoracTheBard, host of Atheism 101, where, like the Skeptic, I tackle the ill-informed arguments that theists make, usually by breaking into song.
Cut that out! Cut that out!
And this video will be a two-parter with part 2 or part 1, depending on the order you watch, on Quorac's channel. The link is in the description. However, before we hear some more silly things that theists say, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell and prove the algorithm isn't stupid. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos. Andreas, Foxlide and Phoebe. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Okay, let me mentally prepare for this. Right, yep, I'm ready.
This is the one glaring contradiction with atheism. You claim that everything can be explained by science, and because God can't be explained by science, he's not real. Well, what exactly is science? It's a methodology created by humans for humans to understand the world.
Well, at least he landed in the right ballpark when describing science as a methodology. But no one's saying that because science can't explain God, he doesn't do the real. We're saying that there hasn't been any scientifically testable evidence that bolsters any God claims. If you have any, by all means, present it and get ready for a peer review.
Does that also mean that religion was created by man for humans to understand the ramblings of folks that think gods exist? Maybe?
Okay, then what is a human according to science? Well, humans are a chimpanzee-like clump of cells of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that evolved over millions of years with the motivating force of surviving and reproducing. That's all that you atheists claim humans are, yet you trust science to be the end-all be-all. Do you see the contradiction?
Contradiction? Us evolved meat sacks developed the ability to innovate our way out of the food chain to the point where the methodology we use has given us the tools to communicate globally, and there's somehow a contradiction there? I'm not saying science is the end-all be-all of anything, but I'll take it over faith any day of the week.
And I don't know any atheists that say that humans are just chimpanzees. I do agree that we share a common ancestor, though, because, well, look.
Faith, to me, is about understanding that humans are incapable of knowing the fundamental nature of existence. Therefore, we put our faith in something larger than us, and we call that something larger than us God. We're not claiming to have every answer ever about the universe, but what we are claiming is that there is a force out there that does know everything, and that's who we dedicate our lives to. On the other hand, you atheists claim that you know everything, yet at the same time claiming we are no more than just slightly more evolved chimpanzees. Get your story straight.
I don't know that humans are capable of knowing everything, but we are, like he said, just another animal. An animal that progressed so far beyond mere survival that we started making up stories about how we got here before we could explore the available evidence. I can picture this kid's ancestors sitting around a primitive campfire using the same argument. Do you think if humans were just another animal, we could figure out how to make fire without some kind of divine intervention? I mean, we're special, aren't we?
What does he think animals are? Of course we're animals. And you're right, I don't know if we're capable of understanding everything, but the things we do understand, we can demonstrate that understanding. And the things that non-believers don't understand don't get attributed to a supernatural force.
The tool that us slightly more evolved chimpanzees created is strong enough to understand the fundamental nature of the universe. You can't have it both ways. You can't say humans are just another animal, yet at the same time say we are capable of knowing everything.
I don't ever recall claiming that anyone knew everything. And I can smell something burning, which means either I'm having a stroke or someone's straw man is on fire. Smell anything funny, Skeptic?
Yeah, but I had a protein-rich lunch today, so the thing I smell is very unrelated to all this. And it is great that he admits he is claiming something. Just, demonstrate the claim.
Many atheists will tell us that there is no God. They will tell us that God does not exist. When asked why, these same atheists will tell us that they do not believe in God because there is no evidence for God's existence. Or they may say they lack a belief in God due to insufficient evidence for God's existence.
Well, I see no problem so far.
Yep, we're off to a good start.
These people would have us believe that they are all about evidence. They are an evidence-based community. Of course, when asked for the peer-reviewed research proving that the grounding of existence is impersonal and agentless, they come up empty and expose that are guilty of committing a double standard.
There's no double standard when not being convinced of something.
Especially when you shift the burden of proof. Saying that I don't see proof of an agent doesn't require me to prove there's no agent.
But let's get back to this thing about evidence for God. This may surprise you, but God himself, is the best evidence for God's existence.
Just like Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, is the best evidence for the existence of Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her. If you get to say it about a god, then it's only fair I can say it about my deity, right?
Honestly, Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, sounds much more palatable than any other god on offer. She pooped the universe into existence without complaint, doesn't expect anything from me in return, and doesn't ask for my pre-tax dollars. I'm sold.
Said more clearly, the personal and direct experience of God is the best evidence of God's existence.
Oh, look, QTB. They're saying that experiences of something are now proof of the something that you use the experience to confirm your bias of the existence of the thing that gave you the experience. Yeah, I hate circles so much.
Circles, man. I tell you, great Joe Satriani song, but what were we talking about, man?
Now, it's easy for the atheist to dismiss the existence of God based upon his lack of an experience of God.
But how do you tell the difference between an experience of a god and something you think is the experience of a god?
Great question. As a former evangelical minister, I can tell you from firsthand experience, if you're a believer, the things you believe about God really are true. Because that's how faith works. If you believe it to be true, it is. And furthermore, wait, why is my nose bleeding?
But his lack of an experience does not invalidate the experiences of others. It is true, many atheists hate hearing this, but the fact is, God draws near to the sincere and humble-seeking soul.
As do all the other gods, I suppose. Vishnu goes to those that seek it. Zeus, Odin, Allah, the great Juju, all go to those that seek it. But it just so happens that this AI voiceovers god is the correct one.
Thankfully, the AI VO chose wisely. Some gods are downright brutal when it comes to punishing non-belief. But if my lack of experience doesn't invalidate the experience of others, wouldn't that mean all gods are real then? I mean, who are we to question someone who received a vision from Quetzalcoatl? Which, by the way, hell of an experience, kids. Get yourself some ayahuasca.
There is a right way to approach God. Frankly speaking, apart from sincerity and humility, there is no other way of approaching God. Simply commanding that God respond on our terms and according to our dictates is not the right way of approaching God.
So, if a god comes to you randomly, how can you demonstrate it is indeed a god and not just you interpreting a strange situation as a god?
See, that's where faith comes in, man. If you believe it, it has to be true. Otherwise, why would you believe it? Circles, man.
So, unless the atheist can change how he approaches God, the atheist will never experience God, and God will remain non-existent to him.
But a god won't come to you when you seek it and will appear randomly, but won't appear randomly to someone that doesn't believe in it because they won't accept that what comes to it is a god. Well, isn't that convenient? It sounds like a god isn't really powerful enough to demonstrate itself to those that don't accept it exists.
You know, this is where I've got a divine ace up my sleeve. I did all of this shit for 30 years. Preached the word, humbly sought God with my whole heart and soul, etc., etc. And when I present to Christians that I still came up short, the universal answer is, I was never a real Christian in the first place. So if there's a correct way to pursue God, somehow I fucked it up.
Matter of fact, most people come to believe in God through the power of personal experience. But there is another kind of evidence for the existence of God apart from the personal experience of God. So what is this other kind of evidence for God's existence? Well, the other kind of evidence apart from the personal experience of God's presence is indirect evidence as seen in the world around us.
You just know that this is a look at the trees argument yet again, QB.
Oh, wait, yeah, I know this one. Let's see. All of creation speaks to God's existence because the universe is ordered so clearly by his design. Do I win a prize?
Now, when I say the world around us, I'm referring to the fact that we live in an orderly universe that is mathematically orchestrated to incredible and outstanding precision, coupled with 100,000 other mysterious coincidences that made our existence possible.
Yeah, is it though? Given that humans can't survive on how much of the planet? And coincidences, does that mean it wasn't orchestrated and it was, indeed, random chance?
I do love the math exists, therefore God argument. It's right up there with look at the trees, and my evidence is the fact that there's so much evidence. If he brings up Pascal's wager, we'll have ourselves an entire Christian sampler platter. Available for a limited time for only $19.99 at your local Chick-fil-A.
In fact, the sheer number of these outrageous coincidences that went in our favor have astounded and boggled the minds of some of our greatest scientists. Some scientists have even said the whole thing is a fix, a put-up job, a wonder of masterful engineering. In fact, if we were to document every single coincidence that made our existence possible, this video would never end. I said in the beginning of this video that many atheists will tell us that they do not believe in God because there is no evidence for God's existence. But I need to point out that when the atheist says that there is no evidence for God's existence, the atheist is directly asserting that the existence of our world and the 100,000 coincidences that made our existence possible is not evidence of God.
Because it's not, unless you can demonstrate it is.
The claim is the evidence.
But unless the atheist can show that these things came into existence independently from God, they cannot prove that these things are not evidence of God unless they can first demonstrate that the grounding of existence is agentless and impersonal.
Well, that isn't how things work. The default should be, I don't know, let's find out, not, a God did it until you demonstrate otherwise.
Well, that's your problem right there, ST. If you don't start with the presupposition that God is real, who are you supposed to tithe to while you're figuring it all out?
In short, they would first have to prove that God does not exist before they could say these things are not evidence of God.
Nope. I do not accept your laziness in shifting who has the burden of proof.
And what do you know? I did have shifting the burden of proof on my bingo card. What are the odds?
Let me ask it this way. Does the atheist have the conclusive ontological proof of God's non-existence?
They don't need to. This AI can't prove the great cosmic rainbow deity didn't poop the universe into existence.
Actually, using AI VO Bot 3000's own logic, we can't discount others' experiences of God. Therefore, Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe is real. Leaf be upon us all.
Do they have the peer-reviewed research proving an atheistic ontology? Has the atheist proven what no scientist has ever proven? Have they provided us with demonstrable, irrefutable proof of God's non-existence, apart from a mere baseless assertion?
I almost cannot take the projection from this one, Quorak.
Indeed, it is blinding, but if Brobot here is interested in peer-reviewed research, I'd be happy to show him that plants can't survive without sunlight, which is a claim the Bible makes.
No, they have not. Not even close. Is the atheist aware that any claim regarding God's non-existence is a purely imaginary claim to knowledge?
Yeah, this is just silly now.
I mean, if we're talking about imaginary claims to knowledge, yeah. Moving on.
All right, I've got 3 more questions for atheists. Here is number 1. Do you believe that our beliefs ought to be proportioned to the evidence? So should we only really believe something if we've got evidence in favor of it?
Absolutely. Is there any claim you would suggest accepting without evidence?
Well, in his case, probably a god. All of his videos seem to be questions for atheists, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like he listens to the answers. And this answer seems obvious. Why would anyone accept a claim without evidence?
Number 2 is, if we could verify that some miracle actually occurred, would that give us a reason to think that God exists? And again, this is contingent on whether or not we could actually verify that the miracle happened.
Ruh-roh, we're entering muddy water here. What is a miracle? I've heard it attributed to everything from a rainbow to childbirth, so I'll defer to ST on this one since I have no idea what Cameron here means by the word.
I'm with you, Q. Cameron and I may have very different views of what a miracle is. I perform tricks sometimes, and some folks may see that as a miracle when there's usually a very simple explanation. So if I performed an unexplainable trick that was viewed as a miracle, would I suddenly then be a god?
All right, number 3, and this is my final question. If you're an atheist that cares about truth and thinks that we should proportion our beliefs to the evidence, But then you also think that we've got this unique way to verify whether or not God exists through studying miracles. How many of the millions of miracle reports throughout history have you actually deeply investigated?
Well, if I had to investigate every time someone saw Jesus appear in their toast or witnessed some kind of phenomenon they couldn't explain, I don't imagine I'd get much writing done. So if you have some kind of event that points to a God, by all means, present it. Until then, all you've got is a mountain of wives' tales.
Right. What millions of documented miracles? I mean, there are stories in the Bible, but that's not documented miracles. That would be claimed stories. That's a big difference.
Atheists cannot answer this question. We know time, space, and matter was all created at the Big Bang. But if it was all created at the Big Bang, what caused the Big Bang? The cause would have to be something timeless, spaceless, and immaterial.
Why couldn't it just be that a densely packed area couldn't sustain its own mass and went, blah, I can't be small anymore? But, without the talking and whatnot.
I do love folks who say that the cause had to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, because those are all the qualities of things that don't exist.
And the atheists would say, we don't know. So if you don't know, why could it not be God?
Why could it not be Lisa the rainbow giraffe, leafy upon her, pooping it all into existence?
Hell, why not Odin? Ravens are badass.
And if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all?
Is that their default? Because it gets tiring.
Can I just copy-paste that never-ending story joke from before here?
So 3 questions I honestly have for atheists. Not gotcha questions whatsoever. Just would love the answer to help me in my own spiritual journey.
I got bad news for you. Spiritual journeys aren't a thing, but I'll try my best to answer your questions.
I used to be terrified of spiritual journeys until one day I wanted to learn how to guide them. Then I started my rocky road into the land of secularism and atheism. Ex-spiritualists love spiritual journeys, or at least how ridiculous they sound.
One would be, do you believe that God does not exist?
I don't believe any gods exist, hence the whole Atheism 101 channel.
For me, it depends on the definition of the God for me to believe a God doesn't exist. But like Q, I don't believe any do.
2 would be, are you an evidentialist? So do you follow the evidence where it leads to get to this belief?
Well, I do believe in following evidence, and that you shouldn't believe in things for which you don't have good evidence for.
It depends again. I don't believe in floating sky fairies due to the lack of convincing evidence, but I do accept that when I next sit down on my sofa, it'll be very comfortable because of the evidence to support that acceptance.
And then thirdly, if you believe that God does not exist and you are an evidentialist, what is this evidence, the preponderance of it, that leads to this great belief?
Oh, that's easy. Based on the evidence I've been presented, I've concluded that gods are as made up as any fairy tale, and those who adhere to a religion have been indoctrinated into it, believe in it for bad reasons, or are actively making money off of it, whether they believe the lore or not.
Yeah, right. I'm really just not convinced.
Okay, so I have a question for all the atheists out there, but first, I want to preface it with this. We know the universe had a beginning because God tells us in Genesis 1.
But we don't care what the Bible says. Until you can demonstrate that the Bible is the word of a God, it's just a glorified set of stories.
But skeptic, a book said a thing.
Then Isaac Newton found out that an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless an outside force acts on it. So if time, matter, and space all had a beginning, that means some X variable had to start it.
But you're just accepting that time had a beginning. What if we can only observe a moment and have no way of seeing previous to that, but time was still just going before that moment? I'm not saying it did, but there could be many other explanations that don't need gods.
Right. As we live in a universe that seems to be entirely populated by natural processes, I'd say it's a fair bet that the universe itself is the result of natural processes. I could be wrong, but if I thought I was right without having evidence to back it up, I'd be a theist.
We also know that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Or everything that begins to exist has an explanation for its existence. That makes way more sense.
And you can make that kind of statement without flirting with presuppositionalism.
I know y'all don't believe there's sufficient evidence for the existence of God. What evidence do you have that you feel supersedes the evidence for God?
I don't need any. I'm just not convinced of any of the evidence presented.
I'm going to stick with day 3, plants, day 4, sunlight. That's one of my favorites.
If you were walking in the woods and saw a clock, then you did some science to figure out how the clock functions, you would still say that the clock had a creator.
Obviously, given that we know how clocks are made.
Watchmaker, watchmaker, bring me a god. Build up a man out of the sod.
Why is that? That's because we know for a fact that creations do not create themselves.
Right. So let's stop with the silly language games.
Oh, come on. Without silly language games, what would theists have?
Whether it's a life, whether it's a painting, whether it's music or a clock, creations do not create themselves.
Which one of us gets to tell him how life comes to be? Because the way babies are actually made is way more fun than being created.
His face says, I know how to make a baby. But his argument says, I'm saving myself for marriage to find out.
So, if we could assume that a painting has a painter, music has a musician, a life has a parent, then why can't we assume that the universe has a creator?
Because all those other things are demonstrable.
And there's that magical word, assume. I don't need to assume a painting has a painter. I can produce evidence of the painter. Now produce evidence of your God.
I know y'all love to say the burden of proof is on me, the believer, but nah. Because it's very illogical to believe that the creation just created itself when there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence for anything just creating itself.
Sorry, bub, but there's no evidence for a God creating anything. Instead of not understanding and just accepting that, you fill the space with a God. Now, what's that called again? The God of the, no.
Oh, I know this one. It's the God of the craps. Because whenever you bet on the don't pass line, the shooter always says, God damn you.
So why would it be logical to believe the universe doesn't have a creator?
Because there's nothing to suggest it does.
Plus, if you really think this 93 billion light-year stretch of space was the result of an act of will, then your God is really into black holes. And I don't want to kink shame, but not my bag, baby.
Tons of silly there, and absolutely nothing that proves any God. A bunch of questions that can very easily be answered. Thanks, Quorac, for coming here to help out with pointing out the silly things that folks say in the name of trying to end atheism. Where can folks find you?
Oh, QuoracTheBard has a YouTube channel and a Patreon as well. If you're on the then say hi on Twitter before this app goes to hell.
And do go and check Quorac out. I've put his channel and the link to the other part of this video in the description. Go and subscribe and bestow leaves upon him from the one true rainbow deity. Although you may not think that any of this was stupid, let me know in the section below. I'm going to skeptic this as just being the tip of the silly things that theists say iceberg. A big thank you to this month's top level ticks on Patreon. Dark Ether Piao, Tamo, The Barely Bearable Atheist, George, Godless Granny, Addy Rockhart, The Enixes, Jakari, Elizabeth, Whiskey Tech Fred and Rick, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.